You're 33 years old and you've got nothing to show for it. My brother didn't say it quietly. He said it across my parents' backyard in front of every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had driven in for the 4th of July, while smoke from the grill drifted over 40 people holding paper plates and red cups. He was smiling when he said it, like he had been holding it in all afternoon and finally found his moment. Everyone heard. A few people shifted their feet. Some looked toward the potato salad like they had suddenly discovered it fascinating. My father kept flipping burgers. My mother folded her paper napkin twice. Nobody said a word. So I set my drink down on the picnic table, looked straight at my brother, and said, quietly enough that people had to lean in, "That's funny. Because I got married 11 months ago. My name is Faye Merritt. I am 33 years old, and I work as a pediatric occupational therapist at a children's rehabilitation clinic in Atlanta. I spend my days helping kids relearn how to button their shirts, hold a fork, and write their names after illness or injury. It is the most quietly important work I have ever done, and most of my family could not tell you exactly what that means. What they could tell you is that my brother Grayson has a corner office at a financial consulting firm, drives a leased BMW, and bought a 4-bedroom house in Alpharetta 3 years ago. That is what success looks like in my family. Square footage and a good zip code. Grayson understood that language fluently. I never learned to speak it. Growing up, the gap between us was understood but never spoken about directly. Grayson was the planner, the responsible one, the son who called every Sunday. I was the one who wanted to take a gap year before college, who changed her major twice, who spent a summer volunteering at a pediatric ward instead of interning at my father's friend's accounting firm. Every decision I made was quietly noted and filed as evidence of something: instability, naivety, a general failure to get serious. When I graduated and took a job working with children instead of something corporate, my father said, "That's nice, sweetheart," in a tone that meant the opposite. Grayson said I should have gone into healthcare administration if I wanted to work in hospitals, because at least that paid better. Nobody asked me why I chose what I chose, or what I loved about it. They just measured it against what Grayson had done and found it smaller. I stopped explaining myself after a while. There was no point. Whatever I shared became material for the next gathering, either used directly or filed away for later. I had bought my own condo 3 years ago, a 2-bedroom place in Decatur that I paid for myself on my salary, without asking my parents for down payment the way Grayson had. I didn't announce it. I just moved in, painted the walls the color I wanted, and built a life there piece by piece. Not out of secrecy, but because I had learned that sharing things with my family did not feel like sharing. It felt like offering something up for inspection. What nobody knew was that for the past 11 months, I had not been building that life alone. I met Dean at a charity gala 2 years ago, one of those fundraising dinners for a local children's hospital where you pay too much for rubber chicken and sit next to strangers. He was seated at my table. He was a high school biology teacher who coached the school's junior varsity basketball team, and he had been invited because one of his students had been a patient at that hospital the previous year. He told me that story within the first 15 minutes, quietly, without making himself the center of it. He talked about the kid, not about himself. I noticed that. We talked through the entire dinner and exchanged numbers at the end. He texted the next morning to say he had looked up occupational therapy and was amazed he had never really understood what it was before. That was how Dean was. Genuinely curious, genuinely interested, completely without performance. We dated for 8 months before he met my family at Thanksgiving. It was the first and only time he came to a family gathering before our wedding. He was quiet that day, the way thoughtful people often are in rooms full of noise. He observed. He was polite to everyone. He helped my mother clear plates without being asked. On the drive home, somewhere on I-85, he said, "Does your brother always talk to you like that?" I told him it was just how Grayson was, that he did not mean anything by it, that it was just family. Dean drove for a moment before he said, "I don't think that's true. And I don't think you actually believe it is, either." He was not angry when he said it. He did not tell me to cut anyone off or demand I confront anybody. He just said it plainly, and then he let it sit there. Something about hearing it out loud in a car on a highway made it harder to push back down. He started saying something to me regularly after that. He said, "You don't have to perform being okay for people who aren't protecting you." That sentence lived in my chest for months. When he proposed, 9 months after that Thanksgiving, We were sitting on my back porch on an ordinary Tuesday evening, eating Thai food out of containers. There was no restaurant, no ring hidden in a dessert, no choreographed moment. He just put down his fork and said he wanted to build something with me for the rest of his life, and asked if I wanted the same thing. I said yes before he finished the question. We married at the county courthouse with 2 witnesses, my closest friend from graduate school and Dean's college roommate. Afterward, the 4 of us went to a seafood place near the waterfront and spent 3 hours eating crab legs and laughing until our sides hurt. It was the best day I could remember. We chose not to tell my family right away. It was not a decision made in anger. We talked about it honestly and came to the same conclusion. We did not want our marriage to become a topic for debate before it had a chance to just be ours. I had watched my family take things that mattered to me and turn them into entertainment. I was not going to hand them that. We agreed we would tell them when it felt right. We did not expect the moment to arrive the way it did. The 4th of July at my parents' house had been a tradition since I was a child. My mother made her cold macaroni salad and banana pudding. My father managed the grill like it was a second career. The cousins brought folding chairs and cornhole boards. By 3 in the afternoon, the whole backyard would be full. Kids chasing each other through the sprinkler, uncles arguing about college football, aunts arranged in lawn chairs catching up on everything that had happened since Easter. I had always loved it. There was a version of these gatherings that was genuinely warm, genuinely good. The problem was that there was another version running just underneath it, and Grayson usually found a way to bring that one to the surface before the fireworks. Dean was supposed to arrive later. He had been coaching at a summer basketball clinic that ran through noon, and he was stopping to pick up the watermelon and drinks I had offered to contribute to the party. We had planned it that way from the beginning. I would go early to help my mother set up, and he would come when he could. I did not expect what happened before he got there. The afternoon started fine. I helped arrange the tables, set out the plastic utensils, and talked with my Aunt Iris about her garden. My cousin Jerome showed me pictures of his new baby. My father was in good spirits. For the first 2 hours, it felt like the good version of the day. Then the food was ready, and 40 people spread across the yard with their plates, and the way the crowd arranged itself put me near Grayson and a small cluster of relatives that included my Uncle Roy and 2 of my father's cousins from Augusta. I do not know exactly what started it. I think Grayson had been talking about a recent deal at his firm, and someone asked me how things were going at the clinic, and I gave a short, honest answer, that we had had a difficult quarter because of insurance billing issues, but that we were working through it. That was enough. Grayson set his plate on the picnic table and looked at me with what he probably believed was genuine concern. "Faye, real talk. When are you going to stop spinning your wheels? You went to school for 6 years, you're smart. But you're 33 and you're still dealing with billing problems, still renting, still just." He paused and smiled at the relatives around us. "She's always been like this. Since college, just floating." A few people chuckled. The comfortable kind of chuckle that is not really agreement but is not disagreement either. I recognized that sound. It meant nobody was going to say anything. My uncle nodded slowly. "You know, the older you get, the more it matters to have something stable, a plan, people to come home to." Grayson picked his fork back up. "You're 33 years old, and you've got nothing to show for it." He was not yelling. He did not need to. The group around us had gone quiet and quiet carries. My father glanced over from the grill. My mother, standing 20 feet away with a pitcher of sweet tea, had heard. I could tell by the way she went still. I had heard versions of this speech my entire adult life. The tone was always the same, concerned, reasonable, surrounded by an audience. And I had always done the same thing in response, smiled, deflected, changed the subject, swallowed what I was actually feeling, and let the conversation roll past me, like a tide I just had to wait out. This time I set down my drink. "That's funny," I said, "because I got married 11 months ago." The backyard did not freeze the way a room does in a movie. It was more gradual than that. The conversation nearest to us stopped first. Then the next one, as people caught the shift in energy. By the time my father came around from behind the grill wiping his hands on his apron, maybe a third of the party was paying attention. Grayson stared at me. He made a short, reflexive laugh, the kind people make when they are certain they have misheard something. "What did you just say?" "I got married again, last August, at the courthouse. His name is Dean." His expression moved through several stages quickly. disbelief, amusement, a reaching for some way to make this smaller than it was. Come on, Faye, you don't have to, why would you? I'm not making it up, I said. He's on his way. He's bringing the watermelon. My mother walked over slowly, still holding the pitcher. Her voice was very quiet. What are you talking about? I'm married, Mom. I said it gently. We've been married since last August. He is a good man. You are going to like him. My father reached the edge of our circle. He looked at me for a long moment before he spoke. Why didn't you tell us? Before I could answer, the gate at the side of the yard opened. Dean came through it carrying a large watermelon under one arm and 2 grocery bags in his other hand, wearing a light blue short-sleeved shirt, squinting a little in the July sun. He looked around the yard until he found me. His expression settled into a quiet smile, the way it always did. He crossed the yard toward me without hesitation. Sorry I'm late, he said. He set the watermelon down on the nearest table and looked at the people standing around me. You must be Grayson, he said to my brother and extended his hand. Dean Wakefield, Faye's husband. He said the word without emphasis, without drama, simply as a fact. My brother shook his hand slowly, looking like a man who had arrived at a party, only to discover it was already over. Dean greeted my parents warmly. He shook my father's hand and kissed my mother's cheek. She looked like she might cry, though I could not yet tell whether it was from hurt or from relief. Probably both. Dean was easy and unhurried about all of it, as if he had not just walked into 45 minutes of accumulated tension. My cousin Jerome was the first to speak. Wait, you've been married this whole time? Since last August, Dean said. My Aunt Iris looked between us. How did nobody know? I took a breath. The crowd had shifted to face us. Children had drifted closer, sensing something important without understanding what. We made a decision together, I said. We didn't hide it to hurt anyone. I paused and looked at the faces around me. My parents, my uncle, the cousins, Grayson still holding his fork at his side. Every family gathering I can remember has ended the same way. Someone says something about my choices. Someone asks when I'm going to get serious or settle down or find my footing, and nobody stops it. I didn't want my wedding day to become something I had to defend. I wanted one day that was just ours. The yard was very quiet. A child near the back started to say something and was quickly shushed by her mother. Dean spoke next, without any edge in his voice. We didn't keep our marriage private to punish anyone. We kept it private because we wanted it to start in peace. That's not an accusation. It's just an honest answer. My Uncle Roy, who minutes earlier had agreed that I lacked stability and a plan, cleared his throat. I shouldn't have said what I said, he told me quietly. Nobody followed up on that immediately, but the weight in the yard had changed. It was my Aunt Iris who started pulling the thread. She was standing with a group of older relatives when she said, to no one in particular, I have heard that same kind of comment made to Faye at every gathering we've had. Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas. I kept telling myself it was just the way the family talked. A cousin named Willa, one of the Augusta cousins, nodded slowly. I remember at your graduation party, she said, looking at me. Grayson told everyone you would probably end up doing something administrative because you weren't competitive enough for a real clinical role. She paused. I thought he was joking, but you looked like someone had knocked the air out of you. Someone else remembered a birthday dinner where Grayson had told the table, without my knowledge, that I had asked our parents for money, which was a distortion of a private conversation about a shared expense on a vacation we had all taken together. Another person remembered a comment at a family cookout 2 summers earlier about how my apartment was very sweet for where she is in life right now. Each memory was small on its own. Together they described something that had been visible to the people around me, even when I had tried to tell myself it was not a pattern. Grayson crossed his arms. His girlfriend Renata had stepped back, creating a quiet distance from him without appearing to make a deliberate choice. This is being blown way out of proportion, he said. I was expressing concern. That's what family does. My Aunt Iris looked at him steadily. Concern sounds like asking how you can help. What you said to your sister today in front of all these people wasn't concern. She let a moment pass. I have never once heard you say something in front of a crowd that made Faye look good. Not one time. The pause after that stretched long enough to become something of its own. Renata quietly excused herself to get more to drink and did not come back to Grayson's side. The party did not end badly. It just changed shape. People gathered in different configurations, the way a room rearranges itself after furniture is moved. Some relatives came over to Dean and me separately and introduced themselves properly, as if meeting us for the first time, which in a way they were. Jerome brought Dean a plate of ribs without being asked. My Aunt Iris stayed near us for most of the afternoon. Grayson left early. He told my parents something about traffic on the interstate. Renata went with him, though she hugged me on her way out, briefly and with more warmth than I expected. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be clear about that. There was no satisfaction in watching my brother leave before the fireworks, or in seeing the expressions on people's faces when they connected pieces of a picture they had been looking at for years without seeing it. What I felt was more like something releasing, a pressure I had grown so accustomed to, that I had stopped recognizing it as pressure. It felt like the first full breath I had taken at one of these gatherings in a decade. Dean found me by the dessert table later. He handed me a slice of my mother's banana pudding, and stood next to me without saying anything for a moment, watching my father try to teach my youngest cousin how to do the electric slide to music coming from someone's Bluetooth speaker. "You okay?" he said. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. The calls started 3 days later. My Aunt Iris called first. She apologized for not saying something sooner, not at that party, but at the many gatherings before it where she had seen the pattern, and convinced herself it was not her place. She said she hoped Dean and I would come to her house for Sunday dinner sometime soon, just the four of us, and let her meet him properly. Jerome called the next evening, and said he had been thinking about the Augusta birthday party, the one where the lone story had circulated, and felt ashamed that he had repeated it without ever checking whether it was true. He said he was sorry. A few days after that, Willa sent a text. It said only, "I've been thinking about this week. I'm glad you have someone good." My Aunt Iris mentioned in a later conversation that Renata had not attended a firm event with Grayson the following weekend, one she had been planning to go to for months. I did not read too much into that, but I noticed. Grayson did not call. Not that week and not the week after. I was not waiting for it. I had stopped waiting for things from Grayson a long time ago, the way you stop watching a door after you have understood it is not going to open. My parents called together, which they had never done before, in my memory, about 3 weeks after the 4th of July. They asked if Dean and I would meet them for brunch at a restaurant they liked in Midtown. We went. The conversation started the way those conversations always do, with food orders and comments about traffic, everyone getting comfortable with the discomfort. My mother mentioned the restaurant's mimosas. My father talked about a problem with the garage door opener. Then my mother folded her hands on the table and looked at me and said, "We owe you an apology." I waited. "We knew," my father said. He said it clearly, the way a person speaks when they have decided to stop leaving themselves a way out. "We knew it went further than teasing. We told ourselves it was just how your brother showed he cared, and that you were strong enough to handle it. We made that easier for ourselves than it should have been." My mother's eyes were wet. "I spent so many years trying to keep the peace between you two, and what I actually did was keep asking you absorb everything he did. Because you never made it a fight, you were always the one who walked away. And I confused that with you being okay." I had imagined a conversation like this so many times over the years, in my car, in the shower, in the half-awake spaces before sleep. In most of those imagined versions it came with a flood of feeling. Relief, grief, anger finally released. What I actually felt was quieter than that, more like recognition. "I forgive you," I told them, "both of you. I mean that." I watched my mother's shoulders relax. "But I need you to know that forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing. You spent my whole life using the word family to mean that I should be patient with things that weren't okay. I'm not willing to do that anymore." I looked at my father. If things are going to be different, they have to actually be different. Not just promised. My father nodded. He did not argue. That mattered. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "We want to know him," she said. "We want to know Dean properly. We want to do this right." "Then we'll give you the chance," I said. Dean, who had been quietly eating his eggs, looked up and said, "That's all any of us can ask." On the drive home he reached across the center console and took my hand. Neither of us said much. There wasn't much that needed saying. The following Thanksgiving was the first holiday Dean and I hosted ourselves. We had moved into a larger place by then, a 3-bedroom townhouse in Grant Park, with a porch wide enough for the grill, and a dining room table I had found at an estate sale, and refinished myself over 2 weekends. We strung lights around the front windows and bought more chairs than we thought we would need. Our guests were people who had earned their place at the table. Aunt Iris came, and Jerome and his wife and their new baby. Dean's parents drove up from Valdosta. A few close friends filled out the rest of the room. My parents came too, and to their credit they came without expectation, without making the day about themselves, and left when the evening began winding down without trying to extend it past what it needed to be. Grayson was not there. That was a sentence I could say without grief, not without sadness. I had once hoped my brother and I would find our way to something real, but sadness and peace can exist in the same place, and I had learned to let them. I stood in my own kitchen that afternoon, watching Dean navigate around my Aunt Iris, who was insisting on washing the dishes herself, listening to the sound of my living room full of people who were simply glad to be there, and I understood something I had been reaching toward for a long time. I had spent years waiting for my family to see me clearly, to validate the life I was building, to confirm that my choices made sense, to give me permission to feel proud of what I had made. What I had not understood was that the waiting itself had been the problem, not because my feelings were wrong, but because the permission I was waiting for was never theirs to give. People sometimes talk about public vindication as the goal, the perfect comeback, the well-timed reveal, the expression on someone's face when they finally realize they were wrong about you. I understand the appeal. I had my version of that moment, standing in my parents' backyard, with 40 people watching, and my brother holding a fork with nothing left to say. But that was not where the victory was. The victory had been happening quietly for years, in every decision I made without asking for permission. In every morning I drove to work doing something I believed in. In every evening I sat on my porch with a man who had never once made me feel like I had to earn my place in my own life. That 4th of July, my brother handed me something he had not intended to give. He chose the wrong moment to say what he had always said, and instead of swallowing it, I simply told the truth. The truth turned out to be more than enough.